And especially in today's business climate, where it's becoming much easier for top performing employees to find other options, and where constant communication means that people know what it's like in other offices. And a growing movement where employees are no longer solely motivated by money. Taking care of your people has to be your number one priority. In any discussion about leadership, we have to start with the premise that it's not just about effective management, but that a great leader puts his or her employees' needs first and empowers them to operate at the highest level. This will affect their loyalty towards you, which of course will then affect their customer service, and then that's where your bottom line is really impacted. I joined the Marine Corps after my second year of law school and served as a criminal defense counsel in Okinawa as a motivated first lieutenant. And then I was a criminal prosecutor at Camp Pendleton just down the road here for about 4 years. But when I deployed to Iraq in the fall of 2006, it wasn't the role of a JAG officer. As many of you are aware, in the Marine Corps, all the officers learn the basics of many different positions. So I volunteered for the deployment as a civil affairs team leader. In that capacity, I had the honor of leading a small team of Marines and a Navy corpsman. We were attached to 3rd Battalion and 2nd Marines. We were stationed at Camp Habanilla, which is about halfway between Fallujah and Ramadi in Al Anbar province. Now, I know you're wondering why is Brad Pitt over here on the side managing my squad, but it's just some other really good-looking guy back in the day. As you can see, we had a small team that was outside of our warehouse. We worked there, we lived there. You know, we were a tight group. We got to know each other very well. As a civil affairs officer, I was expected to develop contracts with the local Iraqi leadership to help rebuild the destroyed infrastructure necessary for any functioning city. Things like electricity that works for more than 4 hours at a time, clean running water, drivable roads, and well-needed schools. Unfortunately, as some of you may remember, the fall of 2006 was an extremely kinetic time for the Marines in Al Anbar. And frankly, convincing the local Iraqis to cooperate with us was virtually impossible because the insurgency was quite powerful then. It was right before the surge. And the locals will be visited at night by those insurgents for the slightest sign of working with us. That being said, I'll always look back on my time in Iraq as a highlight of my career because not many lawyers get the opportunity to lead Marines in a combat environment. And naturally, I learned a lot about myself, but also about effective leadership while I was there. We got to an area where we knew an enemy sniper was operating because he had already killed a few of our Marines. But of course, that wasn't going to get in the way of our mission. We had a reporter with us that day, and I had noticed earlier, we had made 2 stops earlier. One was a police station that had been shot up the night before, and Colonel Grossi wanted to talk with their police chief about how to better defend their position. And then we stopped by, it's called the 611 Bridge. It was really unprotected, and we had Marines there, and I never liked going there because there was no permanent hard cover there. And I guess I noticed that the reporter had been just kind of standing around and not moving, which of course is a terrible idea if a sniper may be targeting you. So we got out of the vehicle at our next stop. He and I were in the same Humvee. As we walked away from the Humvee, he told me later, I said to him, "Jay, you need to move quicker here. Don't forget about that sniper. We don't want something to happen to you." He said that based on that, he immediately took a big step forward. And a split second later, a bullet came in right where his head had been and hit the wall between us. Before I could react, the next round hit me behind my left ear and exploded out of my mouth, causing incredible damage along the way. In fact, the Marines around me thought I'd been killed, and when the Navy corpsman came running over, they said, "Don't worry about the major, he's dead." But George Grant is an amazing young man. And even though blood was pouring out of my skull and what was left of my face, he was somehow able to perform rescue breathing on me, even though the bullet just came flying out of my mouth. And then he cut up my throat and performed an emergency trach out of me so I wouldn't drown in my own blood. And it's kind of like a movie. In the face of overwhelming adversity and with complete disregard for his own life, George was able to focus solely on me and keeping me alive. In fact, despite all that was going on around him, including a sniper was still shooting at the rest of the squad, and some of you have been to this exact place or been to places just like this. This is the edge of a battlefield. It's not a hospital environment. There's dirt and rocks and sand and stone everywhere. And George was wearing 65 pounds of protective armor like we all were at the time, so it was a very cumbersome process for him. And then, of course, he was sweating like crazy because just like every day over there, it was over 100 degrees. But despite all that, George did such a perfect job on my tracheotomy that my plastic surgeon back in the States at Bethesda told me he thought another surgeon had performed it. Now keep in mind that George is only 25 years old at the time. So when we're worried about our millennials, I think, well, you know, I know one, not anymore, but I knew one, and he's now 35, but he did great work. And also keep in mind that George had never performed that type of surgery on a human being before. He had done it once down at Camp Pendleton at a controlled training environment for Navy corpsmen, and he performed that surgery on a pig. So I don't know what it says about me, you know, but I'm still here, and George and that pig, I'm sure, is still running around somewhere as well. I'm a big fan of George's. He and I are quite close now. I could talk about him all night, but I'll just show you a couple pictures. The first one on the left, I know it might be a little fuzzy. Obviously, I came back from Iraq a lot earlier than I wanted to, and we were living in Falls Church, Virginia then. And when we heard 3Q was coming back to Lejeune, we got in our car and drove down to be there. And it was awesome. It was like a movie. You know, there was hundreds of Marine family members there. They had a band playing. 3Q had been through a lot, and it was a big deal when they came home. And it was a tight family unit there. And so it was great to be a part of that. And we could see the bus coming through, and of course the Marines are hanging out the window, and they may have had a beer or two along the way. And you can imagine the first person who I went up to and gave a big hug to and said, thank you. You know, thank you for saving my life, which is a weird thing to say. Now, I'm sure that Jordan Bueller and George Grant did not wake up on October 18, 2006 planning on saving my life. Of course they didn't. But they just reacted to the situation around them based on their training and who they are at their core. Compassionate, selfless, faithful, and committed to the greater good. And that's what Semper Fi means to all of us in this room. So here I am almost 10 years later. In October, it'll be 10 years. I can't see out of my left eye. I'm missing most of my teeth and the end of my tongue, and I'm sure you can tell I can't speak perfectly clearly. So why am I a speaker? I don't know. It's probably not the best choice. I can't run because the doctors took bones from my legs to use in reconstructing my upper and lower jaw. I've probably had a couple dozen facial reconstructive surgeries now. I also suffer from post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. All that being said, I'm the luckiest person you'll ever meet. Because of the injury that caused these problems, I'm now far closer to my wife Dahlia than I ever would have imagined before. And I know I'm far stronger than I ever would have thought possible, mentally and internally. And I can put everyday problems in their proper perspective so I can focus on what's truly important to Dahlia and me. Winston Churchill once said, never give in, never give in, never, 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 never. And I try to fully embrace that philosophy during my recovery, just as DJ has. I think it applies to anyone who's facing some sort of adversity in their lives, which is all of us at one point or another. So I'm going to stop right here with the background information. I'm going to just briefly talk about a few of the themes in the book, some things I focused on. Because my target audience for the book was mid-level managers and supervisors, folks who worked hard, knew their job, were promoted, but never learned how to lead people along the way. And there's millions of them out there across our country. And I try to write about the topics in a way that will be beneficial, not just from a business standpoint, although that's the focus, but also just for life in general as well. So the first is that change is good. One incident has caused huge change in my life, of course. That bullet could have missed me, like it did with a reporter, or it could have been like what happened to the Marine behind me, who was also shot in the head by that same sniper. He was shot right here, but miraculously the bullet bounced off the sand goggle, which is not designed for that, ricocheted off to the side. He was knocked out for a few minutes, but he was fine. But clearly that's not what happened. You can see what happened. You know, change has happened. I've accepted the change with it over time. I've grown with it, and now I use it to better my life and the lives of others around me. You know, I'm not the first one to say that life changes for better or worse. It all depends how you look at it. I choose the glass to be half full, not half empty, and to embrace change. I want to live life in the future, not in the past. I've learned that through inner strength and humility and the victorious spirit, we're each capable of overcoming the toughest obstacles. I'm not defined by what happened to me in Iraq, but what I've done since then. And I've certainly had plenty of dark days during my recovery, but laying out my short and long-term goals and then bullet by bullet listing what it would take to accomplish them has really helped me get right back on track. To even have priorities, you have to decide to have priorities, so, which means you're taking an active role in your life and you are in control of your future. And that's a mindset, and sometimes it's a paradigm shift, especially for wounded warriors. But you have, once you realize what your new normal is, then it's up to you. So you can just kind of go through life and bounce around like a pinball, or you can decide, I've already survived the worst thing that ever happened to me, so the rest is easy. Where do I want to get to, and what do I want to do? And I do have a mindset that we're all capable of doing whatever we want. I mean, after I was shot, I was still the honor grad of my command South College. Granted, I was going against a bunch of infantry Marines, but some of them were still pretty smart.
It's not that impressive.
But I decided, I want to see if I still had the intellectual capacity to do something like that. And I, frankly, probably put more work into it than they did, but I was able to do that. So I have long and short-term goals, and I have them written out, and there's a whole spectrum of them. They are personal, they are professional, and they're personal development.